Let me ask you something before you scroll any further. When was the last time you did something, anything, without first checking how it would look to everyone around you? Sit with that for a second, because there is a quiet prison most people live inside and never notice, and its bars are made of other people's opinions. I want to tell you about a man named Nathaniel Brooks. Nathaniel had a corner office, a respectable title, and a phone that never stopped buzzing with praise. On paper, he had arrived. But one Sunday evening, alone in a house he had worked 10 years to afford, he caught his own reflection in a dark window and did not recognize the face staring back. He had spent so long performing for the world that he had forgotten who the performance was even for. That night, Nathaniel asked himself one terrifying question. If no one was watching, if no one clapped, if no one judged, would he even know what he wanted? Today we are placing the stamp of self-ownership on your mental framework, and by the time this video ends, you will understand exactly why the great psychologist Carl Jung believed that the moment you stop living through the eyes of others is the moment your real life finally begins. Stay with me until the very end, because what you have been searching for out there in applause and approval has been sitting quietly inside you the whole time. Section 1. The origin of alienation. Have you ever noticed that you are no longer truly living, but constantly observing yourself through the eyes of others? It starts as a whisper. You think carefully before you speak. You measure your emotions to make sure they fit the room. You weigh every choice against a single silent question. Will this be accepted? On the outside, life carries on. You work, you smile, you show up. But somewhere inside, a part of you keeps stepping back, waiting for the world to react before you dare to move. Carl Jung described a specific moment in a person's inner life when they grow tired, not from failure, but from the endless effort of measuring themselves against everyone else. That exhaustion is a signal. It is your psyche telling you it is time to turn back toward yourself. Think about Nathaniel again. Every promotion lifted him for a week. Every silence from his boss sent him spiraling for a month. His mood rose and fell with other people's faces, and he called that ambition. Jung would have called it something else. The instant a person hands over the authority to define their own worth, they lose the deepest anchor of their psychological life. The problem was never that others were cruel to Nathaniel. The problem was that he gave them the pen and let them write his story. As Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Read that again. The forces you refuse to look at inside yourself will run your entire life from the shadows, and you will shrug and say, "That is just how things are." Jung compared this to a man walking through a forest with no compass. He watches the crowd. If everyone turns left, he turns left. If the group stops, he stops. He does not know where he is going. He only knows he does not want to be left behind. Jung called this living by the collective map, and it is exactly here that alienation is born. Alienation, in Jung's language, has nothing to do with being a bad person. It is what happens when you drift further and further from your true self while telling yourself that you are being reasonable, responsible, and correct. You pick a career because it impresses people. You choose a lifestyle because it is admired. Each decision looks sensible on its own, but stack enough of them together and one morning you wake up exhausted inside a life that does not feel like yours. Let me ask you something honest. How many of your choices this year were truly yours, and how many were quiet negotiations with the fear of being judged? I want you to think about that, and if this is already speaking to a part of you that has stayed silent for a long time, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. I am taking back the authority to define my own worth, and I no longer hand it to anyone. Writing it makes it real. Section 2. The mask that forgot it was a mask. So who exactly has been living in your place all these years? Jung had an answer, and it is not the people around you. It is a structure inside your own mind that almost nobody confronts directly. He called it the persona. The persona is the social mask you learned to wear as a child so you could fit in, stay safe, and avoid being pushed out of the group. It was built to protect you. The trouble starts the day you forget it is a mask and begin to believe it is your actual face. Jung was clear that the persona was never designed to hold the meaning of your life. It is a tool for moving through the human world. When you start hunting for your sense of existence and security inside that mask, a deep crack opens. You stop living from the inside out and begin living to protect an image. And the tighter you grip that image, the further you slip from the person underneath it. There was a woman in Nathaniel's office, Grace Holloway, who everyone described with the same 3 words: pleasant, polished, professional. Grace knew precisely what to say in meetings, what to post online, and how to make sure no one ever felt uncomfortable around her. But over coffee one afternoon, she confessed something that surprised even her. She no longer knew what she actually enjoyed. Every time she wanted to do something different, a chorus started up in her head. Will they find this strange? Will they be disappointed? Will they judge me? Grace was not living badly. She had simply worn the mask so long that she had lost the feeling of living as herself. Her anxiety did not come from failing. It came from having nowhere left to take the mask off. Jung warned us about this directly when he wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." The moment you fully merge with the persona, you begin to live for a picture instead of for the truth inside you. And from there, a strange addiction sets in, an addiction to approval. You need praise to feel okay. You need positive feedback to trust that you were right. That craving does not make you shallow. It only means you have stored your sense of worth inside the mask instead of inside yourself. Focusing on yourself here does not mean burning your life down or rebelling against every role you play. Jung never asked for that. It means learning to tell the difference between the persona and the self. It means being brave enough to notice which parts of how you live exist only to be accepted and which parts come from something true. And I will be honest with you, the first time you loosen that mask, even slightly, anxiety shows up. You are stepping out of a zone of safety you have known your whole life. But Jung believed that particular discomfort is a good sign. It means you are finally touching something real. If this content is starting to make sense to you, take a second right now and click the subscribe button. This channel exists to help you build the kind of mind the world cannot shake, and I would love for you to keep walking this road with us. Thank you for your support. Section 3. The race that was never yours. The moment you loosen the mask and stop living purely to be accepted, an old reflex fires almost instantly. You look sideways. You check whether the people around you are moving faster, whether they have more, whether they are further down the road. And before you even notice, you are comparing. Jung believed that in that exact instant, a person quietly denies their own path in order to join a race that was never meant for them. He insisted that no 2 psychological journeys are identical. Each of us carries a unique inner structure and our own rhythm of growth. Society does not care about any of that. Society builds shared timelines. By this age you should be successful. By that age you should be settled. By that age you should have arrived. When you start measuring your life against those milestones, you stop listening to your own process and force yourself to march to a schedule someone else printed. Comparison, through Jung's eyes, runs far deeper than simple jealousy. It is an act of self-betrayal. Every time you glance at someone else and conclude, "I am behind, I am slower, I am not enough," you are quietly declaring your own life invalid for the crime of not resembling theirs. Here is a story that stayed with me. A man once told a therapist that for years he felt he was falling behind his friends. They had the titles, the money, the settled families, while he kept changing jobs, changing cities, changing his mind. Every reunion left him feeling like a failure. Then a crisis forced him to stop moving entirely. And in that stillness he realized something that shocked him. He had never actually been lost. He had been walking a different road, slower by the world's clock, but far deeper by his own. When he stopped comparing and returned to what genuinely mattered to him, the weight lifted, and not because he had finally caught up. It lifted because he had come home to his own rhythm. Jung captured it in one line worth memorizing. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You cannot become yourself while you spend your days measuring yourself against everyone else's life. Even the old myths knew this. Achilles was the greatest warrior alive, untouchable, so long as he followed his own fate. The moment he chased glory defined by other men, he stepped outside that protection and fell at his one weak point. Read through Jung's lens. That is the story of a person who abandoned his own path to chase a borrowed image of success. The price is always steep. Nietzsche pushed at the same wound when he wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." The tribe hands you its timeline and calls it wisdom. Your work is to keep from drowning in it. So forgetting others, in the truest sense, means forgetting their timelines. It means you stop asking, "Where am I compared to them?" and you start asking the only question that matters, "Am I aligned with myself?" The moment you ask that, the race quietly dissolves, because you finally see you were never supposed to be running in it. Let me ask you something. Whose finish line have you been sprinting toward that you never once chose for yourself? Drop this affirmation in the comments so it takes root. I am walking my own path at my own pace, and I refuse to run a race I never entered. Section 4. Who is really judging you? There is a strange stage that arrives after you stop comparing. You are no longer chasing anyone. And yet the fear of being judged has not left. You are not competing openly, but a look, a vague comment, even someone's silence can still make you feel like you are under a microscope. If that is you, Jung would say, you have not stumbled backward. You have reached a deeper layer of the journey home, the layer where projection has not yet been withdrawn. Jung believed that most of our obsession with being judged does not actually come from the outside world. It comes from the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. He called this projection, the mind quietly taking material it cannot accept internally and pinning it onto someone else. When a feeling or a self-image is too painful to own, the psyche assigns it to other people. We become convinced they are thinking it, judging us, whispering about us, when the real voice belongs to our own inner shadow. Jung put it plainly, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So look closer at your own fear. Who is it that truly does not allow you to make mistakes? Who keeps whispering that you are not good enough, not fast enough, not correct enough? Very often that voice is not anyone out there. It is the shadow, the disowned part of you, and when you refuse to face it, it does not disappear. It just quietly rewrites how you read the entire world. There was a colleague of Grace's, a young man named Ethan Cole, who was convinced his team did not respect him. Every question felt like doubt. Every note felt like criticism. But when Ethan finally sat with himself honestly, he found a belief buried deep down that he had never once said aloud, "I am not good enough." He had never accepted it as something that needed healing, so he flung it outward and assumed everyone else was thinking it for him. The strange thing was, when Ethan started facing his own self-doubt, the world around him seemed to soften. The people had not changed. The projection had simply been pulled back. Modern psychology says the same thing in colder language. the brain fills in ambiguous information using the beliefs you already carry. Walk around with the schema "I am easily judged," and you will read hostility into every neutral glance and every unclear tone. Jung named this centuries before the research caught up. The world you fear is often a mirror of what you have not yet dared to face in yourself. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Most of the courtroom you fear exists only inside your own head, and you are the judge, the jury, and the accused all at once. When you begin to integrate the shadow, when you let yourself see and speak with the parts you once denied, something shifts. Outside voices lose their grip on you. You can hear criticism without crumbling and face disagreement without feeling attacked, because you are no longer asking other people to carry conflicts that were always yours. I want to invite you to do something that will lock this in. Write in the comments a truth you are tired of hiding, an opinion you have been too afraid to voice, a thought that makes you feel isolated but that represents who you truly are. This is part of the work. Claiming your voice, showing your presence, and declaring that you will no longer bend to the imagined judgment of a crowd that was never really watching. Section 5. The stillness where you finally meet yourself. The moment you stop believing that every pair of eyes in the room is fixed on you, life slows down in the strangest way. The noise in your head starts to thin out. And in that settling quiet, you brush up against a feeling most people spend their whole lives avoiding: solitude. Jung saw solitude completely differently from the way we have been taught to fear it. For him, being alone was not abandonment or social failure. It was sacred space, the one place where the soul can finally speak without being shouted down. He wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." When you have lived too long under everyone's gaze, you rarely hear what actually matters to you. So pulling back from the crowd becomes the condition that lets your own truth surface. Picture a lake at dawn. When the wind blows, the surface ripples, and every reflection breaks into distorted fragments. Only when the wind dies does the water go still, and only then does the image underneath become clear. Your inner life works the same way. Surrounded constantly by other people's voices, you catch nothing but fleeting reflections of yourself. Dare to be alone, and the deeper layers begin to rise. Silence does not create your true voice. It simply lets you finally hear it. Consider the years Steve Jobs spent after being forced out of the company he built. From the outside, it looked like failure. Inwardly, it was a deep withdrawal. He slowed down, he traveled, he sat with what actually mattered to him beneath the fame. Many of his clearest ideas about simplicity and design took shape in that quiet season. When he returned, he was no longer chasing noise. He worked from a settled center. Through Jung's lens, that is solitude doing its real work, rebuilding the self from the inside. Nathaniel finally understood this the hardest way. After his company let him go in a restructuring, he spent his first 2 weeks in a panic, refreshing his phone, waiting for messages that stopped coming. Then, slowly, the silence stopped feeling like a threat. He started taking long walks with no destination. He wrote pages no one would ever read. And the questions he had drowned out for a decade began to surface. What did he actually want? What had he been running from? For the first time in years, Nathaniel was alone without feeling empty, and it changed him. That is exactly what frightens people about solitude. It is not the being alone. It is what rises up once there is no one left to distract you. The buried questions, the unnamed grief, the desires you never gave yourself permission to feel. Jung considered facing them essential, because only when you stay with those contents can you integrate them instead of hurling them back onto the world. Focusing on yourself here does not mean cutting off the people you love or turning cold toward the world. It means giving yourself periods of quiet, deep enough that comparison and judgment lose their pull, long enough for your inner order to rebuild. And the paradox is beautiful. When you can sit in silence without panic, when you can be alone without feeling a lack, you return to people more present than ever. You stop clinging, you stop performing, you start showing up as yourself. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you were truly alone with your own mind and did not reach for a screen to escape it? Drop this affirmation in the comments and mean it. I am no longer afraid of my own silence, because that is where I finally hear myself clearly. Section 6. The discipline no one will ever see. Here we reach the turning point Jung pointed toward, where a person stops being dragged outward by the world and begins, for the first time, to build a disciplined inner life. Not discipline as punishment or as another way to prove something. Discipline born from a genuine inner need, what Jung called inner necessity. Jung never praised frantic doing for the sake of feeling valuable. He drew a sharp line between action driven by the outward-facing ego and action rooted in the core. When the outward ego leads, you act to be seen, to be recognized, to win the comparison, and your whole rhythm gets dictated by feedback. But when action comes from inner necessity, you do the thing because something inside you demands it be done, even if no one ever notices, praises, or understands it. Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Real discipline can never come from a universal formula copied off someone else. It appears only when you learn to listen to your own rhythm. Nathaniel is a good example of how quiet this looks. After his burnout, he did not launch some dramatic transformation plan to post online. He simply started waking a little earlier to read. He wrote a few honest lines each morning. He picked the single most important task of the day and did it before touching his phone. Nobody praised him. Nobody even knew, but he grew calmer, clearer in his decisions, and far less rattled by outside pressure. He did not become better than the people around him. He became more aligned with himself, and the results in his work followed as a consequence, never as the goal. The research agrees. Studies on self-regulation, including the work of psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan on intrinsic motivation, show that motivation tied to your own meaning lasts far longer than motivation chased through rewards and approval. When you act for external prizes, your mind tires quickly and demands bigger and bigger hits to keep going. When you act from personal meaning, your focus holds steady. Jung had described this in the language of depth psychology decades earlier. Psychic energy flows over the long run only when it serves the process of becoming yourself. Marcus Aurelius, writing his private notes to himself with no audience in mind, practiced exactly this kind of unseen discipline. Some of the wisest words ever recorded were never meant to be read by anyone. That is the point. The roots of a tree are never impressive to look at, and yet they decide whether it survives the storm. Most people spend all their effort shaping the visible canopy of their lives. Jung's discipline sends you underground, back to nourish the roots in silence. This kind of growth is almost always quiet. There is no breakthrough moment, no applause, just a steady accumulation. Each day you do what is necessary without being pushed. Each time you keep a small promise to yourself, your inner center grows stronger. And once that center is solid, you can move through the world without being dragged around by it. If these words are landing with you in a calm, steady way, take a moment and press like on this video. Not to feed the algorithm, but as a small private signal to yourself that you are choosing to listen to something real inside you. Sometimes, even a gesture that quiet is a form of discipline. Section 7. Withdrawing your energy from the world. So what happens when you have built that disciplined inner life and yet still feel, somewhere underneath, that you are waiting for the world to respond? You are no longer chaotic. You have stopped chasing comparison. But a subtle movement remains, a small wish to be acknowledged, to be seen, to receive some confirmation that you are on the right path. Jung did not see this as a failure. He saw it as the next stage of maturity, the point where your energy truly begins to flow back inward. When the ego is young, it needs reflection to know it even exists. Praise and attention act as mirrors it uses to take shape. But Jung believed the ego was never meant to stay there. As it matures, it stops needing the world to constantly reassure it. It learns to stand on a different foundation, inner coherence, the deep sense that what you live, what you think, and what you do are no longer at war with one another. Machiavelli, writing about power, understood how dangerous it is to depend on the crowd's applause. He warned, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves." The trap for most people is the sweet, addictive pull of approval, and it takes the cunning of the fox to even see it for what it is. There was a woman named Grace, the same colleague from earlier, who had moved past comparison and mostly past the fear of judgment. She had a solid inner life, and yet every time she shared a personal project, she still caught herself scanning for feedback. Not out of weakness. A part of her was still quietly asking, "Is this good enough to be seen?" The day she noticed that movement and simply stopped, returning instead to the plain feeling of doing the work, something eased. She no longer rose and fell with other people's reactions. The work stayed the same. Her peace did not. She had not lost her drive. She had lost her dependence. Jung wrote something that unsettles almost everyone the first time they hear it. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. To fully accept yourself means you no longer need anyone else to witness your worth in order to feel it. That terrifies an immature ego because it has always been fed by feedback. For an ego that has done the work, though, it becomes freedom. Picture your psychic energy as a stream. When you constantly seek validation, that stream runs outward and scatters in every direction. Withdraw it, and the water does not vanish. It sinks into the ground and feeds the roots. Nobody sees the water underground, and yet it decides whether the tree survives the drought. Your inner worth works the same way. It does not need to be displayed. When it runs deep enough, everything you do on the surface becomes steady. This is where focusing on yourself stops being an effort and becomes a natural state. You no longer have to try to forget other people, because once your energy has returned inward, they simply lose their grip on you. You can take a compliment without floating away on it and hear criticism without falling apart, because the center of gravity has moved from outside you to inside you. And that is the quiet, rare kind of freedom Jung was pointing at all along. Focusing only on yourself was never rebellion and never a cold retreat from the people you love. It was a return, a shift of your center from the outside world back to the truth living inside you. From that point on, life does not necessarily get easier, it gets truer. You no longer have to move fast to keep up with anyone, live correctly to be accepted, or live loudly to be seen. You only have to live in alignment with what is moving most deeply within you. And here is the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop searching for your place in the world is the exact moment the world loses its power to shake you. Nathaniel found that reflection in the dark window again, months later. This time, he recognized the man staring back. Nobody had handed him that recognition. He had earned it in silence. So let me leave you with this. If something inside you was awakened while watching, do not stop here. Keep going, because you are not lost and you are not behind. You are simply a little further ahead than the crowd, and that is frightening, but it is also freeing. Now I want to hear from you. Which stamp are you adding to your mindset today? Tell me in the comments. And if you are ready to keep building a mind the world cannot control, subscribe and walk the next part of this journey with us. Not to become a better version for the world, but so you never lose yourself inside it again.